welcome to Inside Influence, the show where we talk to B2B marketing insiders about what's working and what's not in the world of influencer marketing. I'm your host, Lee Odden, CEO and co-founder of TopRank Marketing, and today we're talking with Ryan Bars, Global Social Programs Lead, Social Influencers and Employee Advocacy at IBM Systems. Welcome, Ryan.
Hi, Lee. Thanks for having me.
It's great to see you. So let's start off by having you tell us a little bit about your role at IBM Systems and how you've been blazing a trail in the world of influencer marketing.
Yeah, you grabbed that from my LinkedIn headline.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So great question. And so IBM Systems, I've been in that business group with IBM for the last 5 years and sort of started this influencer and employee advocacy program there, which was one of the first at IBM in general. So where we used to bring influential people who had great Twitter reach to our events, and we wouldn't really talk to them for the next year. And we kind of realized that we needed something that's more consistent and more regular in building relationships. So we changed the focus a little bit on building relationships and then focusing on employees and how do we get them involved and how do we get them to become influential themselves.
Wow. Okay. And that obviously reconciles with the prediction that you made. Thank you again for contributing to the first ever research report dedicated to the study of B2B influencer marketing. And you shared your prediction about an increased focus on employees as influencers. Can you drill down into a little more about how you arrived at that, how that is played out in the work that you do?
Yeah, I'm kind of in this interesting position of having a focus on both these things, which is great. And I think when we started, roughly 5 years ago, it was really on the external influencer. Those people are thought leaders, have great reach on social, can kind of connect with our target audience. And we still love those relationships and we've still developed them. But I think over the last maybe year and a half, 2 years, we realized that our IBMers are also great advocates for our brand. They understand the products and the offerings at a really great level. And so we've spent some time on building those training and enablement for IBMers, right? Because it's not natural for a lot of people to go and be active on social in the right way. Mm-hmm. So we've realized that with the coaching enabling, the ROIs there when getting our IBMers to advocate for our brand, to engage on social in the right ways. We know that branded content on social media in general is just reduced time and time again, right? And we know that, I think there's a stat out there that content coming from an employee is like 8 times more engagement than content coming from a branded channel. So we just naturally think of, as our focus maybe shifts a little bit more from the branded content and the at IBM channels and more on the SMEs, those subject matter experts and some of our other developers and IBMers that really have deep knowledge about our products and offerings. I think that they can really connect great on social and through content with our target market, our customers, our buyers, our business partners.
Yeah, that's a really important focus, highlighting that internal subject matter expertise that's so valuable to their peers. Why would anyone think that it's not also valuable to your customers, to your prospective customers and your community as well? Now, there's different types of influencers, obviously, or different. Well, I have this attitude that everyone's influential about something, right? So we have these engineers and technologists within a tech company, for example, but what about executives? What about senior level executives? How important do you think it is for those folks to build up their influence in the marketplace?
Yeah, I goes to that stat of 8 times, right? 8x more engagement. And I think senior level execs are great because they speak on behalf of the brand. We've actually leveraged them for some of our events to get out and drive awareness, and we see the results there when it comes to getting our senior level executives on board and the team around them to help amplify and drive some of the messaging we want in the marketplace, at least on social media. But I also will advocate for just anyone that has a subject matter expert to be active on social in the right way. As you mentioned, anyone can be influential in one way or another. And you don't have to have the largest reach on social media. You don't need to have the biggest connection number on LinkedIn. It's really just about what can you talk about? How can you create interesting content And then we'll use other people, maybe an external person, to help amplify that and get into the right markets, or other pieces of media, email, digital, that we can leverage to make sure that our customers or prospects really are connecting with the stuff we're talking about and doing at IBM.
Yeah, connecting in a meaningful way, right?
That's
People
what
that
it's
they
about.
can
Yeah,
believe.
it's definitely meaningful is important. You want to be authentic. You want to be genuine. And I think having an IBMer or an employee or wherever company you're at, that naturally brings that authenticity to what they're talking about. You think about yourself and scrolling through social media. You might not be buying some high-tech piece of hardware from IBM through your Instagram, but you kind of stop. At least for my experience, I kind of scroll past the brands at times, right? But
Right.
I tend to stop when I see somebody I trust, or I see another human, and so as a human element, I might stop and listen to what they're saying or what their kind of product they're maybe exploring or describing, and I tend to want to engage more that way.
Absolutely. So with your work with employee advocacy and influencers, it's, I think, a great setup for this question about, if you surveyed employees at large or even senior executives and asked them, do you think, being active on social and creating a presence is important? I think most people would say, well, yeah, sure it is. But then if you also ask them, well, how comfortable are you doing that on your own? I think we get a lower number. So in your job, to inspire advocacy, whether it's a subject matter expert or a senior executive, what are some things that you might do, or what advice might you give to help other people at brands that want to help their employees or senior execs, kind of get over that hump and start
Yeah,
being out there a little bit?
that's a great question, because I do hear that a lot from whoever's on the other side of the Zoom call or the other side of that ask of, hey, we think it'd be great if you're active on social in these ways. And they're like, yes, that makes sense. I want to attack more customers or white space, or develop deeper relationships with our customers currently have, but then how do I do that? And we realize with senior executive leadership, it's a team around them that's really helpful. So maybe they have a communications person or an executive assistant that really helps sort of keep them focused. But also, I've realized that they tend to want to have content that's unique to them. So figuring out a way, when curating content for them to share or for them to create, making it unique to them as an executive or senior level executive, versus maybe something that all the rest of your staff is sharing. They want to kind of feel special. So finding out ways or finding outlets that are particular to them, and through their training and through their knowledge of, hey, I can share this, I can amplify this, or I can build off of this piece of content that I saw from a third party outlet and give my own spin. It doesn't always have to be about IBM. I think it's also talk about what you're interested in. That could be your kids' sports and how does AI relate to that, or it kind of like it's all over the place. But it doesn't have to be always hitting down IBM content all the time.
Well, that's great. I think you really nailed it there. Creating a personalized experience for that executive, that employee, in terms of the content they might share. Because if it doesn't come from them, if there isn't something, if it's not something they feel, or as I like to say, if they don't care, they're not going to share. And that's a great point.
Right, and then their audience feels that too, right? They're just sharing, they're like amplifying something, just like a reshare or pushing it out to their networks, and they don't have necessarily a genuine interest in that. Their audience is going to kind of see that inauthenticity and not engage, and therefore it's just going to kind of be lost to effort.
So in our research report, the 2020 State of B2B Influencer Marketing, we found that 77% of B2B marketers say that their prospective customers rely on advice from industry experts. And 74% agreed that influencer marketing actually improves customer and prospect experience of the brand. And so that's a lot of optimism around influencer marketing. And yet, the vast majority of B2B companies aren't necessarily implementing, influencer marketing, at least as a large scale ongoing program. How does that optimism in the research, how does that line up with, people you interact with within your own company or within your own network? Are they as optimistic?
Yeah, I love those numbers, and it helps me kind of showcase the importance of what I do, and where this B2B influencer marketing trend is going. And I think I haven't ran data myself at IBM on customers and how are they engaging with some of the stuff we're doing with influencer marketing, but I know through people in the industry, through what I'm seeing from IBM as an enterprise. So, Systems being its own business group, and there's several other business groups that also have influencer programs, but at the enterprise level, there's a renewed focus on influencer marketing and like a cohesive direction that we want to go. We've set up influencer councils recently and explored whether that's internal or external, and explored ways that we can sort of build playbooks for the entire enterprise. So I know that we find value in, again, reaching new audiences outside of our branded channels, and we can leverage our employees to do that. We can leverage external influencers to do that. So I definitely agree that those high numbers in the 77%, 74% are hitting our customers, and they are finding value in that. And I go back to my story about the scrolling and these ads, right? Like, again, I personally, and I think a lot of people feel the same, that they will stop on a person-to-person, a human element, and under like someone they trust or someone who's notable in that industry, whether an analyst, influencer, versus sometimes maybe what the brand is saying through a paid advertising or branded post, organic, social.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that
a lot of people oh, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, and like to wrap it up, people join people, right? Like to follow people, and then the organization, the company, sort of the brand follows. So I think, again, we kind of been talking a lot about the human to human, the personalized, the authenticity. So I think that really translates from my experience, maybe as a consumer scrolling through my feeds, to like the B2B space.
Well, there is a lot of intersection. There are similarities and differences with anything, right, between B2C and B2B. I know that we've seen more trends towards the creator sort of expertise and content creation by influencers kind of being borrowed from B2C and applied to B2B content to make B2B content more infotaining and interesting and that sort of thing. More influencers are professional on the B2B side that have the ability to produce content the way you would expect a B2C influencer to do. And yet there are differences. And I'm curious what you feel from your perspective or from your experience. What are the big differences between B2C influencer marketing and B2B influencer marketing?
I think off the top of my head right away, it's in the B2B space, the pool is a little bit smaller of those people, right? To your point earlier, anyone can kind of be influential in one way or another. But when I think that one of the biggest differences, in addition to like a smaller pool, is that B2B influencers need to be subject matter experts. I personally need to feel comfortable with, if I put that person in a room, or maybe a Zoom now, with one of our subject matter experts, that they could riff off the technology theme and I would have no issue with that, right? Like, I don't want that. We can kind of, tech experts, IT people can kind of sniff out fake people, right? And so we got to make sure that everyone that's in the B2B space has that SME quality to them. And in the consumer B2C space for influencers, you can rely a lot more on maybe their reach and their audience. I think audience is both important, but we tend to rely a lot more on their expertise. Can they create content, to your point, kind of borrowing that a little bit from the consumer space? Can they create content that we're going to be able to amplify and promote and put our name behind as a sponsored piece of content? It's definitely important to us on the SME capability.
Great. Hey, I'm wondering if you could share some of the ways, typical ways these days that you're engaging with influencers at IBM Systems.
Yeah. And it's that content piece that you just kind of discussed.
Yeah.
We are focusing on, relationships important. That's always been my go-to, like, bottom. That's the platform, that's the base, that's the foundation of my program from the beginning, has been relationships over time. Really try to avoid the one-off sort of campaign style activations or campaigns with influencers. So what we're doing personally is a lot of the content creation. So that can be from blogging, that could be inviting individuals to events in the future. So some of our marquee events like IBM Think, video interviews, podcasting, kind of that sort of realm. And that stuff lives in a variety of places. It can be on our IBM owned property, so like an IBM blog. It could definitely live on the influencers blog or their LinkedIn page, like kind of wherever the traffic is. And we take a lot of direction from the influencers. We believe that they are the experts with their audience, with the way they create content, how they do things. So we definitely, it's a collaboration of how can we get the most bang for your buck, I guess.
Right.
So that you drive responses, you drive interest, you drive website visits, whatever the KPI is for that activity. But that's really how we're kind of, content is king for us right now. Even though, and we try to do less with more.
Right.
Right. So so content is what we're doing: blogging, videos, webinars, the whole 9 yards.
Well, that sort of ongoing collaboration approach, which we like to call always on, is smart because for many reasons. Obviously, it's working for you, but the data supports it. In our research, 12 times more marketers said they were very successful that were implementing always on programs compared to those who were just doing intermittent campaigns, here and there. So, it's an investment in the relationship, and it pays off for everybody that's involved, actually.
And that can be scary for some teams too in leadership, because you kind of have to be able to say, we're going to need to take time on building these relationships and an always on program, and that relationships are going to take time to build and to build advocates for your brand. It's not going to happen overnight, and you're going to see the return, as you're mentioning, over that course of the time, the relationship, versus maybe just a tent pole in time where we have this announcement and let's just get a big blast, but then we never talk to those individuals again, and it becomes inauthentic for the audience.
Yeah. So you've been a bit of a pioneer with the work that you're doing, and I'm curious, what advice would you share with someone working at a different company who's thinking about starting an influencer and employee advocacy, employee influencer type of initiative? What's the first thing they should think of?
Yeah, I reflect back on my time at the beginning, which has not been that long, because this B2B influencer marketing is not relatively old. But
right.
I think for me, it is focusing and starting small with your program. So where I started, it was like, I want to have X amount of people in our influencer program that have 2 million on reach on Twitter, right? Like, just made up numbers and kind of like went and did that, and realized quickly that having that many people in a program that you're kind of constantly trying to juggle and build, and you're building relationship, it just becomes really hard for one person to do. So I would recommend identifying those like 4, 5, 6 individuals that really have a strong affinity for your brand, for the technology or the industry you're in, and build relationships with them, set goals with them, and kind of build this sort of advocacy program and grow it from there. So that might take a year, that might take a longer time, but you have to be okay with that, and don't rely on their reach, don't rely on sort of how many connections they might have on LinkedIn, but it's more about the person and can they be a great advocate for you and your brand.
That's a great example of how an investment in quality, is going to pay off in quantity, in terms of value that's created, versus focusing on quantity first. Quantity first doesn't actually result in quantity or quality.
Exactly.
Our research found that B2B marketers are integrating what they're doing with influencers with other areas of marketing or comms, like social media, content marketing, even SEO. And I'm curious what your experience has been when it comes to leveraging influencer content in other ways.
This lines directly with my experience at IBM. So I actually sit within the social media team within Systems, and connect really closely on a regular basis with our content teams and our digital teams. And we talk a lot about, I mentioned earlier, like doing more with less. And it's in our best interest to take that piece of content and dice and slice it up so that we can get more from it. So that can look like a blog, and then we create social assets, we put that in an email, Another example, we've recently had, having influencers do an AMA on Reddit or a Quora session. And instead of just living on that platform, can we take some nuggets from that and create social derivatives from that, whether it's maybe a quick video or a blog or again, social assets. So it definitely makes sense for us to kind of take that and repurpose the content we're collaborating on with our influencers.
Yeah, repurposing is a huge opportunity, often just not considered, by a lot of companies that are only driven by campaigns and campaign KPIs and not necessarily thinking about, these are seeds that we're planting with these influencers, and they're like ingredients in a recipe, and you can take those ingredients and season other assets with them, right? Whether they're thought leadership or demand gen, whether it's just part of the relationship building. One of the cool things about repurposing and in the ways that you're talking about is that, these influencers, external influencers especially, they have monitoring on their name happening, and they see when you've mentioned them again in something that can get crawled. And, that makes them feel good about you. The fact that, wow, I did an interview a month ago, and that was published as a blog post, but now here I see it showing up in an infographic or video or something else. That's a signal that helps reinforce the value they get from being associated with your brand.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the benefits to working with an influencer, that you can give to them as a brand, that maybe we can't afford a budget right now, but if we can work together and we create content together, it's going to live XYZ ways, and we're going to leverage it through the years, whatever the course of time, and you're going to get amplified from the brand channel, or you're going to get amplified from the rest of the employees that are helping share. So might not be able to have that paycheck, but you can leverage other ways to drive benefits for the influencers. Definitely.
Absolutely. And influencers monetize, they have their own ways of monetizing things, whether it's consulting, paid speaking, writing books, or whatever. So that brand exposure, the value exchange in terms of exposure and association with the brand, is absolutely something that the vast majority value, as evidenced by the research we found. So one of the last questions I want to ask is, what are you most excited about when it comes to opportunities with influencer marketing in 2021? I suppose anything but 2020 would be good.
I know, it's like, can we get to face-to-face events maybe later next year? Can we start, we talk about relationships, and those are great over, Zoom and email and in-mail, whatever, but, getting in face-to-face is definitely excited about for hopefully later next year. But I think, for me, it's really just to kind of improve, in the same vein, kind of improving on these digital events for next year. This year was sort of the year of pivoting and trying things out and figuring out maybe what works and what doesn't work, what works with your network, your brands, what influencers like doing, what they're good at. And so I think next year, 21 is going to be, I'm really excited about how can we adapt those learnings and hopefully perfect them next year in 21. But also personally, I'm just really excited. I mentioned earlier, just really excited about what IBM is doing in this space and focusing on influencer marketing. It's up to this point, kind of up to the brand channels and the different teams. If you have the resources, if you have the interest, time, kind of go figure it out. But now there's really some direction from across the enterprise on these are the best practices. These are the best individuals to maybe consider. This is how you can build a program. So I'm really excited about that personally.
Fantastic. I was just remembering it. I was actually part of the IBM Futurist program many years ago, attended events and things like that. But I've seen what you've talked about, renewed interest and initiatives with IBM overall, and with enterprise especially. It's very interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in 2021. So where can people find out more about you, Ryan, and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I think the easiest way, I share everything on LinkedIn. So I think head to my LinkedIn and let's connect. And I think that's where you're going to see a lot of the work that we're doing in this space, that I'm doing. I'm also interested to learn from other people in this space. I've loved the previous interviews you've had and all the great experts. Because again, we're all kind of figuring this out together in a lot of ways. And the great research, and I love companies that are allowing us to kind of take that in-house and be able to adapt on it. So I really appreciate learning from others too.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate all the insights you've shared today, and it was great to have this conversation with you. Thanks a lot, Ryan.